Seer Show is a live broadcast of truth seekers and believers, empowering the evolution of consciousness. Raphael and Celeste will dive deeper than the mainstream media while answering the mind's deeper questions and transforming conversations. They will have unique guest speakers who will share knowledge, tools, and techniques to create coherence in our mind, body, and spirit.
Good morning, Celeste. How are you?
Oh, I'm fabulous. Here in Australia, always fabulous. The sun has been shining all day while you've been sleeping here over there in America.
Right? Well, you know, that's what's so interesting, right? That you're doing all these amazing things, but so am I. I'm sleeping, I'm replenishing. And then when I'm doing all these crazy, amazing things, you're replenishing.
That's
So
right. I'm resetting.
today we have an amazing topic which really hits home for a lot of people who may know someone, people who may have somebody in their family who either is going through mental illness, has suffered mental illness in the past. We don't know, when it can hit somebody because there are so many triggers that can happen. So that's the topic today.
That's right. Yeah. I think in general, the last 2, 3 years, we've had people that really suffered. And we see in different countries how people going back to their normal lifestyle. But
Mm,
then again, some people, it's almost like they've nested into their comfort zone in
yeah.
not having to socialize. So it's almost like with this episode, I guess a little bit we're calling people to come out again into life
Yeah.
and dare to be out there again amongst people and hugging again, having that social contact again.
Mm. Yeah, I was telling you before, I have I have some customers of mine. And for me, if somebody becomes my customer, they kind of become like family to me. So
Mm,
I'm always looking at, how I can help them. And it breaks my heart that I couldn't because the pandemic drove a different anchor into them. It held them down.
mm,
So one gentleman who would not leave his house, and so I would bring him food in the beginning, right? And I would just bring it in a plastic bag by the door. He'd be in all gloves and everything, and he'd just take it like that. And eventually, if he did leave the house, he'd have a safe zone that he'd come in and just like take all his clothes off, run in the shower, and the whole deal. And because of all that, he already had anxiety. It just got worse and worse and worse. And where he thought the world was truly coming to an end. And
mm,
no matter what I told him and reassured him that, this was a temporary thing, like all things in life, we have to learn. Like back in 1900s, we had the Spanish flu, and that took a long time to even get a diagnosis for compared to this time around. So, wow. And then I
mm,
have another whole family who won't leave their house currently.
mm.
So,
The sad thing is when we talk about fear, first of all, you can control someone with fear.
mm,
And I think that's been one of the main anchors, as you said before, that so many people had fear. And
mm,
fear will always hold you back with whatever you want to do in life. So we're going to go through a few definitions of different mental health state. Like we're going to be talking about PTSD, OCD, depression, different forms of depression, like bipolar, that's very misunderstood, schizophrenia. Let's start with the one which is PTSD, because that's very close to my heart, because here in Australia, we actually categorize it as psychosocial disability. And what we mean by that is that the government actually supports people that have PTSD. Most of the time, you think of veterans, but this is also for police, ambulance, night shift workers, nurses, fire brigade. So I guess with this episode, I want to remind people that the PTSD is not just if reality happens around them. It could be a very small little symbolic reminder, and they go back into that trauma. And with today's episode, I truly wish to just remind people that when you meet someone and they might be in pain, or they might express to you they have certain stresses or de-stresses going on, we need to almost like, accept that this is the condition they're in, and just show love and kindness. And I think nowadays PTSD is very, very misunderstood. Most people just think of veterans, and that's not true. PTSD can come from childhood trauma. It can come from a car accident. It could come from having a severe illness of cancer and having fear of dying. Again, we're going back to fear.
Right.
So PTSD really has to be understood. It's an intense feeling of de-stress. And as we've spoken many times in our episodes, our brain doesn't know the difference between reality and thoughts.
Right.
So for PTSD people, they'll have something ever so little, a trigger happen, and it will bring them back into that reality. And I want to also again just say thank you to all the veterans, police, ambulance, fire brigade, because they often then suffer after 20 years of being in the police force or being there in the ambulance, that they do suffer from PTSD.
And sometimes it's not 20 years. It could be 2 years. It could be an occurrence in time, something that triggered that emotional disturbance, if you will, something that really, it could have been an environmental thing. It could have been a personal experience. Somebody can even suffer PTSD if they got stuck in an elevator and, maybe there was jolting going on. And then every time they get into an elevator, they feel that same experience. And it becomes something bigger and bigger. There is no discrimination when it comes to mental illness.
No.
Because it can happen to anybody. And there is a significant barrier to seeking and receiving treatment. People don't realize that the importance of listening to someone who may start to have symptoms of any type of mental illness. When we think about the words that people use, the way they act, the way they do things. For example, this particular person I was telling you about that I brought them food and everything. When they went out of their house, they had to stop driving because their anxiety got so beyond their control that they would, if they drove even 5 blocks, then they would have to pull over. And because they hit a bump in the road, they thought they hit a person. And then they will go looking for, I was told that this person went like 2-3 hours when they went out for 5 minutes, and then they would spend 2-3 hours looking to see if they hit somebody. They'd be looking behind garbage cans, bushes, questioning themselves over and over and retracing their steps. They could have sworn in their mind they hit someone. So it's pretty devastating.
It is. It really is.
So when we think about the impact it has on the lives of family members, the caregivers, people with mental illness. When we think about the prevention of mental illness, or it can include early intervention, like I said a few minutes ago, and it's identifying and addressing the risk factors and promoting mental health, mental well-being through education. So a lot of times we need to be more educated and aware of what someone may be going through. There's certain signs that you
Yeah.
start seeing in a person, right? So if you know someone who is dealing with mental illness, there's some ways that you can help. You got to educate yourself, right? If you start seeing things, you got to go, why are this is happening? So you can't start to blame them for it. You just got to be more aware of what's going on. So you got to learn about the specific mental illness that may be going on with them. This will help you understand their experiences and provide better support for them, right? You need to offer them support. Know that you're there for them and that you care. I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to say. Hey, listen, no matter what you're going through, I'm here for you. So offer and listen without judgment. Spend time with them, help them with simple tasks that you and I don't even, we're thinking like this is simple, but to them it may be a struggle. you know, Encourage treatment. That's one of the things that a lot of people, they say, well, why don't you take care of it? Why do you feel that way? And all of a sudden it's almost blaming. And that can be detrimental to somebody who doesn't understand themselves what they're going through. And then if we start blaming them, like, oh, you're being a baby about this, or you're not handling this right, man, that could be detrimental. It can even put them deeper in the hole, if you will.
That's right. And I think a lot of the times people don't realize they're going through these phases. So it's very hard for the partner or the family member or the sibling or the friend to actually sit them down and go, I've known you for so long and I love you and I respect you and I honor you. But I feel like sometimes you go through these phases. Can you explain to me how you're observing it? Because this is how I think you're feeling like. So asking the right questions before saying, this is what you're doing. It's more questioning, how do you feel about what happened last night? Or how do you feel about what you just did a few hours ago?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are certain signs you can see in the personal reactions,
Right.
what kind of disease it is. And you can go and seek help. For those people who are maybe too shy to address the person, you can go and speak to a psychiatrist or a counselor, get advice on how to slowly approach that person. And most of us adults, we are all aware of it. Childhood trauma always comes up as an adult. And but very often we're sort of like, no, I'm an adult now, I can deal with everything. But I want to go into like 3 different ones that are very common, and one of them is betrayal trauma, rejection trauma, and abandonment trauma. So these are like the common ones that reoccur when we're adults, but we're not quite sure of it or aware of it because we've been blocking out our childhood. And for those who still have the parents and the siblings around, the way you can discover these things about yourself is actually openly talking about your childhood with your parents or your siblings. So betrayal trauma, that actually gets people into not being able to manage their emotions. They have panic attacks and phobia, and they also have nightmares, where the opposite side with abandonment trauma, it's just very low self-esteem and depression and fear of abandonment. So that's sort of like the opposite. And then you've got rejection trauma, when people become a people pleaser as an adult. And people pleasing is it's a very dangerous,
Oof.
where you want to go into, because I'm sorry to say, but there are some people out there that will find a people pleaser on purpose to sort
Mm.
of get their way. So this people that have rejection trauma, they worry so much about what other people think, and they become people pleasers, and they always have that sort of negative assumption of something. So if you
Mm.
notice someone who has that, again, ask questions about the childhood and let them maybe discover that they had that betrayal, rejection, or abandonment, and that's why they have these personality traits as an adult.
Yeah. When we think about the depression aspect of it, it can get so bad, and then you get the abandonment to go with it. That's, I believe, where people also take their own lives. That's
Mhm.
where it becomes super dangerous, and where people believe that no one cares, and that's the abandonment part. And then the depression of like, I'm no good also. And then because they try to please everyone, and then if you combine all those three, my gosh, that is a pill that's not easy to swallow for a lot of people, and unfortunately they do take their own lives.
And they also don't live their own lives, and that's
Hmm.
very sad. They're constantly living someone else's life.
Right. Yeah.
That's
It's
where people pleasing is very, very dangerous. You just mentioned depression, and the definition of depression is a condition that elevates or lowers the person's mood or perception onto things. And once I started doing this research about depression, like, I didn't know that bipolar was actually one of the forms of depression, which is very genetics and environmental based. And then there's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. And so the bipolar 1, that's the one where you just said it is so tragic that people do take their own lives. And it is really just that chemical imbalance where they have these episodes for days and weeks where they
mm,
actually are not aware that they're in this triggering moment of high energy and mood swings. They're really not themselves. And we talk about manic and psychosis, and that's what bipolar 1 is. They have
mm,
absolutely no idea that they're going through these episodes. And that's the dangerous part with suicide. So with bipolar 1, as friends, family members, partners, this is where you have to actually reach out for professional help.
mhm,
Bipolar 2 is more the sadness, loneliness, irritable moods. It's sort of that constant low esteem and low self-worth. That's different to deal with. But again, bipolar 1, bipolar 2. So for those who want to research more into it, there are huge differences. And it
yeah.
takes a long time to actually diagnose someone
Oh
with
yeah.
that. Mm.
You know, I got to tell you a story. Are you okay with that?
Yes, let's tell
Okay.
stories.
So back in 2001, I had a kung fu student who became a black belt with me, and I knew he had issues because I wouldn't teach him unless I got doctor's permissions from his doctors. And so I took him under my wing. I treated him like a son. And I would give him, rides. I would help him out. I would do things for him. His dad was non existent, even though he lived with his dad, his dad and his grandmother. And his mother lived upstate, a whole 5, 6 hours away. And this poor kid was in turmoil because of the relationship that he had with his mother. She didn't want him. She literally didn't want him. And so what wound up happening, because he had bipolar, he got in with some kids that gave him drugs, which made things worse. And so this is the first incident that happened with this young man. He was upstate with his mom at his mom's house. He went crazy. This young man ripped the leg off the table that they were eating dinner on and destroyed the whole house. Now, the police were called. They could not hold him down. It took eight adult men, 8 police officers to finally put him down. So it goes to show where his thinking was not there, but it also goes to show how good my kung fu was that I taught him. So I'm just kidding. I'm kidding on that one. But
So much for the PTSD of police officers, Raphael.
this young man. Now I didn't know that this had happened, and then it happened again at his own grandmother's house, where he went the whole thing. Police officers. It took like about 8 or 9 this time to sustain him. So they finally took him. The way I found out is his grandmother called me, and she told me what happened. And she goes, "You're the only one that cares for my grandson besides me." I said, "Okay." So I went to visit him at the psych ward in the hospital. He was there for about 3 months. And then, he was crying. He apologized to me. And I said, "You have nothing to apologize for." And so he wanted to come back. And I said, "I cannot have you in there because I have kids who are running in there." And, one of the things that stemmed from this, I found out later on, is that my son was born. That's why I know the date so well. 2001, my son was born. And because I treated this young man like my son, he thought I was taking my love that I had for him away from him and giving it to my own child. So at this point, I said, "Well, until you get cleared again, I can't have you as a student." So he would go and stand outside the facility and pace back and forth. I had huge windows. I had, 35 feet of windows, and he'd pace back and forth, back and forth. And people inside were terrified. And so I would finally have to go outside and I'd say, "Hey, you can't do this. You can't be walking back and forth." I said, "I promise you." I said, "I'll come visit you." And he would start crying again, "But I want to be in there with you." And I said, "I can't have you. You're scaring other people." And he was 6'3", big guy, big guy. I'm 6'1", so he was bigger than me. And so it became, and then he had another incident where he tore down the house again. And he's back in the hospital. I go to visit him. He's crying again. So later on, his grandmother calls me. She found in his room, when he tore up the place, a box of not only letters, but a box of because at one point I had him working for me. I had him cleaning the place because he couldn't deal with other people, right? In a good way. So I said, "Let me give this kid a job." So he would clean and stuff like that. All the checks I ever gave him, he never cashed them. All the money I ever gave him, he put in a box. And in that box, he also had a death note of people he wanted to kill. I was number 1 on his list. So
Raphael.
I know, right? But I still felt for this kid. And so another time because I teach weaponry, he came in and I wasn't there. And he came in and he threw money at the person at the front desk. It was another guy. He threw money at him and he threw the sword at him. He had the sword was in a case, and he threw it behind the counter, and he threw all this money at him, like, I don't know, like $3,000 that I had given him, and he threw it at the guy. And the guy just called me, and he was all terrified. He goes, "What do I do?" I said, "Well, you got to tell him he has to leave. If he doesn't leave, you have to stay on the phone with me. I'll call the police." And so finally he left. And so I went to visit him, and I said, "Listen," I said, "at this point, if you walk into the facility, you're a threat. So the police will be called." I said, "This is not something that is good for you." I said, "I'm here for you. I'll help you out." And then he cooled off a little bit, but then he would come back, and he'd reach out to me through email, social media. "Please take me back, take me back, take me back." I said, "I'll visit you. I will always have a place for you in my heart, but I cannot teach you. You're already too deadly. Eight men, 9 men couldn't hold you down." I said, "So there's no way I can teach you any further." He was, I believe, a second-degree black belt with me. So I said, "I can't." And so finally he moved away. And one day he came to visit. I had moved locations. And this was in 2001. He came to visit me in 2007. He gained a lot of weight. He had a full beard, and he was the same way. You can see it in his eyes. He wasn't all there. But he did go to college. He did do all these things for himself. So he was getting help. But he asked me again, would I take him as a student? And I said, "I'm sorry, I cannot." I said, "But, I'm always here for you. But I can't have you even here today." Because he wanted to come inside. I said, "I can't have you come inside." I said, "Because the only reason I know you were out here is because you were pacing outside, and people got scared and they called me over." I said, "So I can't have you, in the facility at all." So he reached out to other people to find out, like where I live, all these different things. So it got to a point where I haven't seen him since 2009. And, I always wish him well. But I do see every so often when I do something on social media, because my presence is there, he always tries to befriend me, on social media. And of course, I unbefriended him just so that, it's, I had to keep my distance from him. But
Yeah.
it is pretty scary when, you're on somebody's death wish.
Yes. Safety does come first. And
Mhm.
this is going to always be the hardest part for wives or husbands, family members, siblings, in your case being the trainer and you have the responsibility of other children and other members. So it's almost like, how do you help someone with mental health issues, but still having your own boundaries up?
Mhm.
Boundaries is a subject we've spoken about so many times, and it is so incredibly important to have your boundaries first, because even the Dalai Lama says you need to have to give. So keep yourself safe, and then you're able to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can take recovery from any type of mental illness, does take patience. It does take time. And it does, like in this young man's situation, it does take help from the mental illness society, if you will, or those specialists, people who understand it way better than you and I. Even though you seem very well versed in it, I seem well versed in it, but we're not experts, right? So anybody listening to this show,
Yeah.
realize that we are not experts. And if you feel like someone in your life needs help, get them the help, recommend them the help, talk to them, be patient with them. It's not something that it sometimes it's out of their control. Like
Yes,
this
it is.
young man, one I'm on his death wish list, and then he's crying. He's crying that how much he loves me, and but meanwhile, he's looking to kill me. So it's a fine point where
Mm,
people have acted out on that.
mm.
During I should have seen the sign, because during my black belt test, anybody who goes to black belt, they have to fight 10 different people 1 minute at a time.
Mm.
And usually I fight them last. I know it's a physical aspect, right?
My God. Okay.
So anybody who's ever become a black belt with me, I fight them. So we do fight. And when it was his turn to fight with me, you can see it in his eyes. He literally was trying to hurt me. I mean,
God.
and he ran at me. I mean, literally ran, screaming, ah! And I saw it coming, and I just, I'm a calm person. So I saw
Wow.
him coming. I moved over to the side, pushed him over, and and I fought him. But remember, this guy's way bigger than me, and he couldn't touch me. But the fact that he was trying to literally hurt me, and it
Mm,
was, if he can really hurt me, he was doing his best, until finally it was 2 minutes later. Usually, you fight for a minute. It was 2 minutes later. He didn't want to stop. So I had to
mm,
put him down. I nicely put him down, if you will. And then I said, okay, hey, congratulations. The test is over. But
mm.
that was the first sign that I ever saw that he wanted to have any ill regard towards me.
I think, you just mentioned seeing signs, and we often love someone so much that
Mm,
we pick up almost the red flags and we stuff them into our backpack, which is
right.
getting heavier and heavier. And we
Mm,
keep walking and go, oh, there's another flag, there's another flag. So, again, with this episode, we want to remind people, if you are one of these people that love someone so unconditionally, but you're picking up the red flags and you're putting it in your backpack and it's getting heavier and heavier to carry,
mm,
don't go too far,
yeah.
because the consequences could be vital for your own life, your own family, but most of all, also for that person. Because
Mm,
not all mental health issues are able to function in a normal life. Some of them you can actually even use to your advantage. There's another one I'm going to mention now with OCD. But in your case, that's a very good example. Don't pick up too many red flags
mm,
and stuff them in your backpack, because it's just going to get heavier and more difficult to move
right.
throughout life, you
Mm,
know? So the definition of OCD, and the reason I'm mentioning this one is because I sort of looked into America and Australia and what are like the top 5, the top 3, and OCD really came up a lot, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, I'm speaking on a live radio show, and I have no problems, Raphael, in actually admitting I have a little bit of that OCD myself. And so it is a long-term chronic sort of disorder. There's a few different ones. Number one is contamination of bacteria. So people that always have to clean and wash themselves. That's a very
mm.
common one.
And their
The
hands are red.
Yeah, and everything has to be scrubbed. You can't move anything. The other one is, again, ordering and arranging things to be perfect, double checking things the whole time. That is, in a way, how you can use it to your advantage. Like, especially working in theater, I've noticed some lighting people or audio people, they're OCD, but they've used it to their advantage in double checking
Mm,
everything. Everything needs to be perfect in place. So if you're setting the props for every show, it needs to be exactly where it
exactly.
was, because, you know, you need to echo the same show. So as an adult, if you're aware of a certain mental health issue, you can also almost work with it. And with OCD, there are people that are actually able to use it to their advantage. So if you're noticing someone within your work environment that you go, oh my God, that person just checked those cables 10 times. Okay, let them do that. Because if you realize, well, this person's going to do an amazing job, then let them maybe check that cable 10 times. So again, it goes back into this beautiful harmonic and heart chakra awareness. Accept that workaholic, how they are, and work with that. But again, that goes back to communication. Do they actually know they have that OCD and they've actually expressed that to everyone or not? So, you know, the other one is though with OCD, that's the sad one, is when they have really unacceptable thoughts. So quite horrific thoughts that come over repeating again. That causes the anxiety. So again, when some people joke and go, oh, that person is so OCD, they keep on checking things, you know, just be careful, because some OCD characteristics also include, though, not just the repetitive movement of checking things, but also repetitive thoughts. So someone that wants to express themselves several times, and it's almost like, you just said that 3 times, I heard you the first time. It's just their mind is going something over and over and over again. So again, with OCD, if you know someone who has that, you can actually work with it. It doesn't have to be something that negative. So I guess, again, expressing these things on this episode, if you are aware of what they're going through, you can work with that, and you can work with the person if they are aware of it, though. And this is the big call out to adults. If you're realizing there's something that you're always doing, look into the symptoms, and maybe again going back into childhood, because the more you are aware of it yourself, the more you can consciously just go, "Ooh, I'm having a moment," and then share it with that person, you know. So OCD is interesting because it has that negative side of repeated negative thoughts, but also you have these people that are so intricate in having everything perfect. And some careers you want that, you know, like in architecture, theater.
Like a cleaning aspect.
Right. If you're an OCD and you're a cleaner, perfect.
You're right. You're in the right profession.
So a little bit on that positive note is, there are some mental health issues that you might have. Live with it, work with it, admit to it, share that with other people, and use it within your daily life.
Yeah, but you know, the other thing that you can do is, if you notice that somebody does something over and 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 over, you can kind of like help them out. Hey, can I help you with that? Can I check that for you? And maybe you say, you know, let's do it together.
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes, you know, when we think about, sometimes people are late, and the reason they're late is because before they leave the house, they do a protocol of checking. They check the stove, they check the faucet, they check the this, they check the that. Did I unplug this? And they leave, and then they go back in the house, and then they go through the same process again. Then they leave, and then they go back. And then what winds up happening is that now they not only do they have the OCD, but anxiety sets in. That's what happened with that client of mine that I was telling you. He couldn't even drive because he had to and it took 2 hours, 3 hours to go and see if he hit somebody, because he'd check again and check again and check again and check again. I swear I could have hit somebody. Meanwhile, he had a bump on the road. So where he couldn't drive anymore, and his girlfriend started driving. And then what wound up happening is he couldn't look out the window because he could have sworn that she hit somebody. So it became really, really bad for him.
And driving is such a normal day-to-day thing.
Yes, it is.
That's the difficult part. There's two other things I've noticed in our society, but these are not actual mental health diseases or disorders, but narcissists. I just want to tap into like a few different things here, because I think often it happens that people come to counselors and they go, I'm really starting to question myself. I think I have these problems or those problems.
Right.
But it's actually that you are surrounded by someone who's making you feel that way. And so I want to just go a little bit into gaslighting and narcissism, because very often, especially in our society right now, you see it all over, even TikTok, Instagram, everywhere. Like, oh, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have this, you have that. There's so many labels out there, Raphael.
Oh, yeah.
But very
Crazy
often,
amount.
well, are you maybe just creating that in your own mind because someone else is making you feel that way? So there are people out there like narcissists, they've got this inflated sense of a self importance. They have no empathy, but they need a lot of attention. They don't have any boundaries. And so they will maneuver people to actually go through that roller coaster of emotions. So for those, again, who might feel like there's something wrong, is it really yourself, or is it the environment you've placed yourself into? This could also be career, that you're in an office every single day and you're actually not maybe around nice people, or people that don't align with that same kind of, maybe morals and ethics that you have. So I would like to express, don't straight away question yourself too much or let someone else label you, because sometimes we get ourselves with the wrong people. Gaslighting is huge. So for those who don't understand gaslighting, that's an abuser that will control a person by twisting their reality and making them actually think what happened, or how it happened, or why it happened was very different. And if you have someone like that for like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years marriage, you're going to completely lose yourself at the end of it. And the truth is, there's actually nothing wrong with you. You were just with a person who is a gaslighter. And gaslighting happens in so many different ways. It happens in business, if you want to control someone business-wise. And let's be honest, Raphael, all of us in business, if you are in the leadership position, you almost have to control and maneuver your team and your staff. But just be careful you're not gaslighting yourself. So this is a little bit of a maybe read about what gaslighting is. Are you doing it maybe, unconsciously for business? And parenting as well. Now, I'm not a parent myself. So again, it's really important that we express today, we're just bringing up topics for people to be inspired. If they feel like it's relating to them, go and do your research. But with parenting, it often happens denying the child's feelings, labeling the child's feelings, or dismissing it and going, no, it wasn't that bad. Or no, that's not how it was. That's not how you feel. Be careful as a parent that you don't gaslight. Maybe you have the good intentions, but you're changing the reality of what happened to that child or that teenager. So especially for parents, please look into what gaslighting is and maybe just be aware. Are you doing it maybe unconsciously? So gaslighting is a really, really, really big one, guys, especially here in Australia. When you go through the rates of like counseling and all of that, a lot of people are actually just fine, Raphael, but they've just been with a person that has gaslighted them.
Yeah.
And we lose ourselves. We love unconditionally.
Celeste, you and I are probably going to talk about this always, right? Because we care. We want to make sure that people get the help they need. But we are actually going to be ending the show in like 30 seconds or so, because we're going to make it a short show today. There's a lot going on for both of us. So we want to let everybody know that this topic is not ending because we're ending the show. This topic is ongoing. It's something that touches, listen, it's touched my life in so many different ways that I almost
Yeah.
died from it. But I mean, listen, I don't think I was in danger. You know, me, it's not my time. So, and it's being careful of who you surround yourself with, making sure you put those boundaries in place as well.
Yeah.
But we're not done talking about this. But even though the show's ending now, do us all a favor. Follow us. Let us know what you think of the show. Make sure that you're always, always participating and helping someone in your life.
Yeah.
So, with
Love.
that in mind, Celeste, have an amazing, amazing rest of your day. And next week, it's going to be another great show. We have a great guest coming in. Do you want to tell
Yeah.
him or do you want to hold up?
Well, I'll hold up a little bit, but it's all about our planet nature because she actually controls everything, Raphael. Let's be honest. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
us humans, we're like this growing fungus that just wants to take over everything. And we all, including you, myself, and everyone, we need to do a lot more for the environment and Mother Nature. And our guest speaker next week, he's worked for NASA. He's doing all these amazing projects when it comes to the wildlife and the nature here in Australia, but on the whole planet. And again, talking about mental health, talking about the Mother Nature. This is the shift that we're part of. And I believe the Seer show always brings on guest speakers that just inspire you to sit back and go, oof, what a beautiful time to be alive. And what can I do? What can I do today to have my impact on this beautiful planet?
Yes. Well, you, my dear, have an exceptional, exceptional rest of your day. And everybody listening, make today an amazing day. Bye, everybody.
Bye for now.